The transport shuttle descended through the crystalline atmosphere of Nexus Prime, carrying its cargo of new cadets to the most prestigious military academy in the galaxy. Among the passengers sat a small human girl who looked no older than 16 standard years, her feet barely touching the floor of her seat. While the other cadets around her towered with impressive alien physiques, scaled Drakkari warriors standing 8 feet tall, crystalline Vorthen with their diamond-hard exoskeletons, and the ethereal luminari who seemed to glow with inner light. She appeared fragile and out of place. Her name was Sarah Chun, and she clutched a worn photograph of her parents, both decorated Earth Defense Force officers who had died defending a mining colony from raiders. The other cadets barely acknowledged her presence, assuming she was perhaps someone's younger sibling who had accidentally boarded the wrong transport. How could they know that this small human had scored higher on the Academy entrance exams than any candidate in the institution's 300-year history? The Academy of Galactic Defense rose before them like a metallic mountain, its towers piercing the clouds. Built by the Confederation's greatest architects, it was designed to house and train the finest warriors from across known space. The shuttle bay alone could accommodate vessels the size of battlecruisers, and, as their transport settled onto the landing platform, Sarah couldn't help but feel dwarfed by the sheer scale of everything around her. Commander Vextar, a battle-scarred Drakkari with scales that had turned silver with age, stood waiting to address the new arrivals. His voice boomed across the platform as the cadets disembarked. "Welcome to the Academy of Galactic Defense. You represent the finest your species have to offer. Here, you will be forged into the instruments of peace that keep our galaxy safe from the threats that lurk in the void." Sarah found herself swept along with the crowd of cadets, each of them eager to prove themselves worthy of the Academy's reputation. As they entered the main hall, she craned her neck to take in the massive holographic displays showing the greatest battles in galactic history. The Battle of the Crimson Nebula, where Admiral Thorne's fleet had held off an entire armada of quantum pirates. The Siege of Kepler Station, where a single squadron had defended against impossible odds for 72 days. The dormitory assignments came quickly. Sarah discovered she would be sharing quarters with 3 other cadets. Zuratich, a Vorthen whose crystalline body could deflect energy weapons. Kilryan, a luminari who could manipulate light itself as both weapon and shield. And Morgoth, a massive brutari whose species was known throughout the galaxy as unstoppable warriors. When they saw their new human roommate, the expressions on their faces ranged from confusion to barely concealed amusement. "There must be some mistake," Morgoth rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "This is a military academy, not a daycare center." Zaratich's crystal facets caught the light as she tilted her head. Perhaps she is here for the civilian education program? Many academies have such things for the children of faculty. Sarah said nothing, simply unpacking her few belongings into the assigned locker. She had learned long ago that words meant little compared to actions, and she would have plenty of opportunities to prove herself in the days ahead. Her silence seemed to confirm their assumptions about her being some kind of mistake or misplacement. The first day of classes began with combat theory, taught by Professor Kylex, a veteran of the Void Wars whose left arm had been replaced with advanced cybernetics. The amphitheater-style classroom could seat 500 cadets, and Sarah found herself in the back row, barely visible among her towering classmates. "Combat," Professor Kylex began, "is not about strength or size or even speed. Combat is about understanding your enemy better than they understand themselves. It is about seeing the pattern within chaos and finding the thread that unravels everything." He activated a holographic display showing various alien species and their combat characteristics. The Screeth rely on overwhelming numbers and chemical warfare. The Void Hunters use stealth and advanced technology. The Devourers employ brute force and biological adaptation. Each requires a different approach, a different solution. When the professor called for volunteer analysis of a tactical scenario, Sarah's hand shot up before she could stop herself. The professor's many eyes focused on her small form in the back of the classroom. "Cadet Chun, sir." "Sarah Chun." "Very well, Cadet Chun. You're presented with a scenario where a Confederation outpost is under attack by a combined force of Screeth and Void Hunters. The outpost has minimal defenses and no possibility of reinforcement. Your response." The classroom fell silent. This was a scenario that had stumped military strategists for decades. How to counter an enemy that combined overwhelming numbers with technological superiority. Sarah stood, her small voice carrying clearly in the hushed amphitheater. The Screef and Void Hunters have never worked together successfully in recorded history, sir. Their tactics are incompatible. Screef rely on chemical markers for coordination, while Void Hunter cloaking technology disrupts those same chemical signals. I would focus our limited defensive capabilities on forcing them into closer proximity, creating interference patterns that would disrupt both their chemical coordination and their stealth systems. Once their cooperation breaks down, their individual tactical advantages become manageable. The silence stretched for several heartbeats before Professor Kylex slowly nodded. That is an astute observation, Cadet Chun. One that took our strategic command 6 months, and considerable casualties to discover during the Battle of Zirian Prime. Whispers began to ripple through the classroom as cadets turned to look at the small human who had just demonstrated knowledge that surpassed seasoned military officers. Sarah sat back down, her cheeks burning with embarrassment at the attention. Physical training proved more challenging. The obstacle courses were designed for the diverse physiologies of the galaxy's warrior species, with platforms 20 feet high and gaps that required tremendous leaps. Sarah watched as her classmates navigated the course with ease. Morgoth simply powered through obstacles with brute force. Kilryan used light manipulation to temporarily blind sensors and slip past barriers. And Zaratich's crystalline form could reshape itself to fit through impossibly small spaces. When Sarah's turn came, she stood at the starting line looking impossibly small against the towering obstacles. The instructor, a gruff Brutari named Sergeant Kor, shook his massive head. This is ridiculous. She'll get herself killed on the first obstacle. But Sarah had been studying the course while watching her classmates. She noticed things they had missed, handholds disguised as decorative elements, surfaces with different coefficients of friction, patterns in the obstacle timing that created brief windows of opportunity. Where others saw individual challenges to overcome with superior physical capabilities, she saw a puzzle to be solved with careful observation and precise timing. She began to run. Instead of trying to leap the 20-foot platforms, she used the obstacles themselves as stepping stones, ricocheting off surfaces at angles that multiplied her momentum. Where the gaps were too wide for her small frame, she found alternative routes, ventilation shafts, maintenance conduits, structural supports that the course designers had never intended as pathways but which offered passage for someone small and clever enough to spot them. The watching cadets fell silent as Sarah navigated the course in ways none of them had considered. She wasn't stronger or faster than them, but she was seeing possibilities they had missed entirely. When she crossed the finish line, her time was not only competitive but had actually set a new course record. Sergeant Kor stared at his chronometer in disbelief. Impossible. Run it again. Sarah ran it again. This time, having memorized the optimal path, she shattered her own record. The whispers started that evening in the dining hall. Who was this small human? How had she gained admission to the academy? Some speculated she was the result of a genetic enhancement program. Others wondered if she might be some kind of alien in disguise. The more paranoid cadets began to suspect she was a spy sent by one of the Confederation's enemies. But it was during the first week's survival exercise that everything changed forever. The exercise was simple in concept. Teams of 4 cadets would be dropped on a hostile moon with minimal equipment and expected to survive for 72 hours while completing a series of objectives. The moon of Kithara was notorious for its unpredictable weather, aggressive wildlife, and terrain that had claimed the lives of several cadets over the years. Sarah's team consisted of her 3 roommates, none of whom had warmed to her despite her impressive classroom and training performances. As their shuttle approached the drop zone, Morgoth made his feelings clear. Stay out of the way, little human. This is real survival, not some puzzle to be solved with clever thinking. The drop went smoothly, their team landing in a rocky canyon near their first objective marker. But as they began to move toward their goal, Sarah noticed something the others had missed. The rock formations around them showed signs of recent disturbance. Scratches too regular to be natural, scorch marks and patterns that suggested weapon discharge. We need to move, she said quietly. This area has seen recent combat. Zaratich's crystalline body chimed dismissively. The briefing mentioned no hostile forces in this sector. Briefings can be wrong, Sarah insisted, but her teammates were already moving forward, confident in their superior physical capabilities and dismissive of her concerns. They had traveled less than a kilometer when the first energy blast split the air where Morgoth's head had been a moment before. From concealed positions among the rocks, a squad of void hunters emerged from their cloaking fields, their advanced weapons targeting the cadets with deadly precision. Void Hunters were among the most feared mercenaries in the galaxy, standing 7 feet tall and encased in adaptive armor that could bend light around them. They were invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. Their weapons could punch through starship hulls, and their reflexes were enhanced beyond natural limits by military-grade cybernetics. What they had not expected was the response of a small human girl. While her teammates dove for cover, Sarah was already moving. She had analyzed their attack pattern in the first seconds of the ambush and identified their primary weakness. Void Hunter cloaking technology had a brief reset period between activation cycles. For exactly 2.7 seconds after becoming visible, they could not recloak. Sarah's first move saved Ryan's life, tackling the Luminari cadet behind cover just as a particle beam carved through the space where he had been standing. Her second move was to grab a handful of the moon's iron-rich sand and fling it in a specific pattern that she had calculated would reveal the cloaked positions of the remaining attackers. Zara-TH, crystal resonance at 47 kilohertz, now, she shouted while rolling behind a boulder. The Vorthan cadet reacted instinctively, her crystalline body producing the requested frequency. The sound waves interacted with the iron particles Sarah had thrown, creating a brief but visible distortion field that outlined 3 more Void Hunters. Morgoth, charge position Delta 77 in 3 seconds. Kill Ryan, blinding flash on my mark. Sarah's voice carried absolute authority despite her small size, and something in her tone made her teammates obey without question. Morgoth's massive form crashed into the first Void Hunter just as Kill Ryan's light burst temporarily overwhelmed the mercenaries' visual sensors. But there were 6 Void Hunters, and Sarah's team was armed with only training weapons while their attackers carried military-grade hardware. The situation seemed hopeless until Sarah did something that would be talked about in academy halls for generations to come. She stood up. In the middle of the firefight, with energy beams carving chunks out of the rocks around her, Sarah Chun rose to her full height of 5 feet 2 inches and spoke in a voice that somehow carried over the sound of weapons fire. Void Hunter Squad, you are in violation of Confederation Treaty 77 Alpha regarding neutral zone operations. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The shooting stopped. Even the Void Hunters seemed stunned by the audacity of this tiny human issuing orders to some of the galaxy's most feared warriors. The squad leader's translated voice crackled through his external speakers. Little human, you are either very brave or very stupid. We have no quarrel with you personally, but we have contracts to fulfill. Sarah's next words changed everything. You have contracts with the hegemony of SEK Tar. I can recite the terms if you'd like. 3 million credits for the elimination of specific Confederation military assets, payment on delivery of proof, with a bonus structure for Academy cadets. But here's what you don't know. The hegemony fell 6 days ago. Your employers no longer exist, which means your contracts are void. You're now operating as unlawful combatants in Confederation space. This was news to everyone present, including Sarah's teammates. How could a first-year cadet have access to intelligence that hadn't even reached the Academy's command structure? The Void Hunter leader lowered his weapon slightly. You lie, human. Our intelligence networks would have detected such an event. Your intelligence networks are designed for tactical information, not political analysis. The hegemony's fall was an internal collapse, not a military defeat. 3 generals, 2 admirals, and the entire civilian leadership council were arrested on charges of corruption and treason. The remaining forces have been absorbed into the Democratic Union of Outer Colonies. Check your long-range communications if you don't believe me. There was a tense moment as the Void Hunter leader activated his communication equipment. Sarah stood perfectly still, knowing that her life and the lives of her teammates hung on her analysis being correct. She had spotted the pattern in recent intelligence reports, missing trade delegations, unusual military movements, changes in shipping routes, and extrapolated the most likely conclusion. The Void Hunter's posture changed as he received confirmation. Impossible. How did you know? Because I pay attention to things others overlook. It's what humans do. Sarah took a step forward. Now, as I said, withdraw immediately. You're professional soldiers, not pirates. Without valid contracts, this is simple banditry, and I know that's beneath your code. The squad leader stood motionless for several long moments. Then, with what might have been respect, he gestured to his team. The human makes a fair point. Stand down. As the Void Hunters activated their cloaking fields and disappeared, the squad leader's voice came one last time. Be careful, little human. word of what happened here will spread, and not everyone will be as reasonable as we have been today. Sarah's teammates stared at her in shocked silence. She had just talked down a squad of elite mercenaries through pure analysis and negotiation, saving all their lives without firing a shot. How did you know about the hegemony? Morgoth asked finally. Sarah picked up her pack and started walking toward their objective marker. I read intelligence reports for fun. Most people find them boring, but they're full of interesting patterns if you know how to look. As they continued their survival exercise, word of the incident somehow found its way back to Academy Command. By the time they returned from the exercise, Sarah Chun had become the most talked-about cadet in the Academy's history. She was the small human who had outthought elite mercenaries and saved her entire team through nothing but careful observation and logical analysis. But she had no idea that her actions had attracted the attention of something far more dangerous than void hunters. Deep in the shadows between stars, ancient sensors had detected the emergence of what they had long waited for, a young human who demonstrated the analytical capabilities and tactical brilliance that marked her species as the galaxy's true apex predators. And they had decided she needed their protection, whether she knew it or not. 3 weeks after the Void Hunter incident, Sarah Chun had become something of a legend at the Academy of Galactic Defense. Cadets who had once dismissed her as a lost child now watched her every move with a mixture of awe and bewilderment. Her tactical analysis classes had become standing room-only affairs, with even senior cadets sneaking in to hear her insights. But Sarah herself remained largely unaware of her growing reputation, focused entirely on her studies and the complex puzzles that military science presented. It was during advanced xenobiology that everything began to change. Professor Ythera, a towering insectoid from the Hive worlds, was lecturing on the behavioral patterns of various galactic species when she noticed something odd. Every few minutes, she would catch glimpses of movement in her peripheral vision, shadows that shouldn't exist, distortions in the air that lasted for just a fraction of a second. At first, she attributed it to fatigue from grading examination papers, but the phenomena persisted and seemed to center around one particular cadet. Sarah sat in her usual spot near the front of the classroom, taking detailed notes on interspecies communication patterns. She had developed a fascination with the subtle ways different alien cultures expressed concepts that had no direct translation, and her notebook was filled with intricate diagrams mapping linguistic relationships across species barriers. What she didn't notice were the Watchers. They stood at the edges of perception, beings whose technology allowed them to exist partially outside normal space-time. To most observers, they were invisible, but Professor Ythera's compound eyes could detect electromagnetic wavelengths that revealed their presence as faint distortions in the local space-time continuum. The Watchers had many names across the galaxy. Some called them the Shadows Between Stars. Others knew them as the Ancient Guardians. The Confederation's classified files referred to them simply as Entity Classification Omega 7, Hostile Unknown. But their true name was lost to time, spoken only in whispers by the oldest races who remembered when the galaxy was young, and the current configuration of civilizations was nothing but stellar dust. They were the Keth Mori, and they had been waiting for Sarah Chun her entire life. The first sign that something had changed came during Sarah's evening study session in the Academy Library. She had claimed a small alcove on the 15th level, surrounded by ancient texts on military history and strategic theory. The vast library of the Academy contained knowledge from across the galaxy. Crystal memory cores from the Vorthan archives, bioneural storage pods from the Luminari Collective, and even primitive but surprisingly insightful paper books from dozens of developing civilizations. Sarah was deep in a comparative analysis of siege warfare tactics when she noticed the silence. The library was never completely quiet. There were always the soft hums of environmental systems, the occasional footsteps of other students, the gentle chimes of automated retrieval systems. But now there was nothing. Complete, absolute silence that seemed to press against her eardrums. She looked up from her studies to find the library empty. Every other student had vanished, leaving behind abandoned datapads and half-finished research projects. The lighting had dimmed to emergency levels, casting long shadows between the towering bookcases. For a moment, Sarah wondered if there had been some kind of evacuation alert that she had missed while focused on her work. Then, she saw them. Figures moved through the shadows between the bookcases, tall and impossibly thin, wrapped in what looked like living darkness. Their faces were hidden behind masks of black metal that seemed to absorb light itself, and their movements were eerily silent despite their obvious size and presence. Sarah counted 6 of them as they approached her alcove, surrounding her with the patient inevitability of predators who had finally cornered their prey. She should have been terrified. Any rational being would have been paralyzed with fear at the sight of these creatures that existed at the edge of nightmare. But Sarah Chun was not like other beings. Instead of fear, she felt curiosity. Kethmori, she said quietly, recognizing them from descriptions in ancient texts that most cadets avoided as too theoretical to be useful. I wondered when you'd show yourselves. The lead figure stopped, tilting its head with what might have been surprise. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a harmonic resonance that seemed to vibrate through the very structure of reality. You know our name, young human. That is unexpected. I know a lot of things that are unexpected, Sarah replied, setting down her stylus and giving the ancient beings her full attention. I know you're not actually hostile despite your classification in Confederation files. I know you've been observing various species for millennia, looking for something specific. And I know you've been following me for weeks now, ever since the incident with the Void Hunters. Another Kethmori stepped forward, its movement like flowing shadow. Your perception is keen, Sarah Chun. But knowledge and understanding are different things. Do you understand why we have come? Sarah considered the question carefully. Around her, the library remained frozen in unnatural silence, as if time itself had paused to listen to their conversation. You're looking for something. Not a thing, but a capability. A way of thinking that your species has lost or never possessed. Humans represent something new in the galaxy, an approach to problem-solving that combines intuitive pattern recognition with analytical precision in ways that other species can't replicate. The lead Kethmori nodded slowly. Humans are indeed unique. Your species looks at problems from angles that others cannot perceive. Where we see chaos, you see patterns. Where we see impossible situations, you see solutions. You are, as your own files classify it, apex predators. But not in the way most understand the term. Not physical predators, Sarah agreed. Intellectual ones. We hunt problems the way other species hunt prey. Precisely. The ancient being moved closer, and Sarah could see that its mask was not actually metal but something far stranger, a surface that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. And you, Sarah Chun, represent the finest example of human analytical capability we have observed. Your mind works in ways that could change the balance of power in this galaxy. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Change it how? The Kethmori exchanged glances that conveyed volumes of information and frequencies beyond human perception. When the leader spoke again, its voice carried the weight of cosmic time. There are things moving in the deep void, human child. Ancient evils that have slept since before your species learned to make fire. They stir now, drawn by the expanding noise of galactic civilization. When they wake fully, they will bring with them destruction beyond imagination. Fleets that darken stars, weapons that unravel the fabric of space itself, hungers that can consume entire solar systems. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. And you think I can stop them? Not stop them. They are too vast and too powerful for any single being to stop. But your mind might find the angle of approach that others cannot see. The solution that exists in the spaces between conventional thinking. That is why we have come, not to threaten you, but to offer our protection. Protection from what? The answer came not from the Kethmori, but from the soft chime of Sarah's personal communicator. The spell of silence broke as the library returned to its normal state. Other students reappeared at their study stations, the lighting brightened to standard levels, and the normal sounds of academic life resumed as if they had never stopped. But the Kethmori were gone, leaving only a small crystalline device on the table where the leader had stood. Sarah picked it up carefully, noting the complex geometric patterns etched into its surface. It was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with a faint internal light. Her communicator chimed again, displaying an urgent message from Academy Command. All cadets were to report to the main assembly hall immediately for an emergency briefing. As Sarah gathered her materials and headed for the nearest transport lift, she noticed something that made her pause. Every other student in the library was moving with the same urgent purpose, but none of them seemed to remember the period of silence. They continued conversations that should have been interrupted, worked on projects that should have been abandoned, acted as if nothing unusual had happened at all. The Kethmori had somehow edited their presence out of everyone's experience except hers. The assembly hall was packed with cadets from all years and disciplines. The nervous energy in the air was palpable as students whispered among themselves, speculating about the nature of the emergency. Sarah found a seat near the middle of the auditorium, the crystalline device tucked safely in her jacket pocket. Admiral Thessera took the stage, her scaled features grim with worry. The old Dracari commander had seen 3 major galactic conflicts in her long career, and Sarah had never seen her look truly concerned before this moment. "Cadets," the Admiral began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustics. "I will not waste time with pleasantries. 47 minutes ago, long-range sensors detected anomalous readings from the Kepler sector. What we found there defies explanation." The main holographic display activated, showing a star system that Sarah recognized from her astronomical studies. Kepler 442 was a G-type star with 7 planets, 3 of which supported thriving colonies with a combined population of over 2 billion beings. Had supported, past tense. The display showed empty space where the planets should have been. Not destroyed, simply gone, as if they had never existed at all. Even the star seemed diminished, its light output reduced by nearly 30%. In addition to the missing planets, Admiral Thessera continued, "We have lost contact with 17 deep space monitoring stations and for patrol fleets that were investigating the anomaly. The last transmission we received was from Captain Mordun of the cruiser Stalwart Dawn." The Admiral's claws clicked against the podium as she activated an audio recording. The voice that emerged from the speakers was strained with terror and barely controlled panic. "This is Captain Mordun to Sector Command. We've reached the Kepler system, but there's nothing here. Nothing at all. The planets are gone, the orbital stations are gone, even the asteroid belts have been cleaned out. And there's something else. We're detecting massive gravitational distortions moving through the system. They're not ships, I don't know what they are. They're coming toward us now. Whatever happened to those planets, I think it's about to happen to us. Tell my mate I." The transmission cut to static. The assembly hall erupted in worried murmurs. Sarah felt the crystalline device in her pocket grow warm as her mind began processing the implications of what they had just heard. Entire planets don't simply vanish without a trace, and gravitational distortions large enough to affect starships suggested something operating on a scale beyond conventional understanding. Admiral Thessera raised her hand for silence. "The Confederation Council has declared a state of galactic emergency. All military academies are being placed on high alert, and graduation schedules for senior cadets are being accelerated. However, regular classes will continue as normal while we assess the scope of this threat." As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah remained in her seat, her analytical mind working through the details of what she had witnessed. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. The Kethmori had appeared to warn her about ancient evils stirring in the void, and now entire star systems were disappearing without explanation. She was so lost in thought that she almost missed the hand that settled on her shoulder. "Sarah Chun." The voice belonged to Commander Vextar, the same Dracari officer who had welcomed them to the Academy weeks ago. "Admiral Thessera would like to speak with you privately." Following the commander through the Academy's administrative corridors, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change dramatically. The crystalline device pulsed more rapidly now, almost as if it was responding to her elevated stress levels. Admiral Thessera's office was a testament to a lifetime of military service. The walls were covered with commendations from a dozen different species, battle maps from famous campaigns, and photographs of the Admiral with various galactic dignitaries. But what caught Sarah's attention was the holographic display showing real-time sensor data from across the galaxy. The pattern was clear once you knew how to look for it. 3 more star systems showed similar anomalies: diminished energy output, gravitational distortions, missing astronomical objects. Whatever was happening was spreading. "Cadet Chun," the Admiral began without preamble, "your instructors speak very highly of your analytical capabilities. Professor Kylex says you have an intuitive understanding of tactical patterns that he's never encountered before. Professor Ythera mentions that you seem to grasp xenobiological concepts that typically require years of study to master." Sarah remained at attention, unsure where this conversation was leading. "I try to stay current with my studies, Admiral." "Yes, I'm sure you do." Admiral Thessera activated her personal workstation, bringing up Sarah's academy records. Perfect scores on every examination, innovative solutions to tactical scenarios that have stumped our best strategists, and, according to your psychological profile, an almost pathological need to understand how things work. Tell me, what do you make of these disappearances? Sarah studied the sensor data more carefully, looking for the patterns that others might miss. The affected systems are all in the galactic rim sectors, but not randomly distributed. If I trace lines between them, she gestured at the display, and the Admiral activated the interface controls to let Sarah manipulate the data. They form a geometric progression, Sarah continued, highlighting the pattern she had detected. The spacing between incidents is decreasing according to a specific mathematical sequence. Based on this pattern, the next disappearance should occur in approximately 18 hours in the Vega system. Admiral Thessera's eyes widened. How can you be certain? Because whoever or whatever is doing this is working systematically. They're not just randomly destroying systems, they're following a plan. And any plan has a pattern, even if it's not immediately obvious. The Admiral stood and moved to the window overlooking the Academy grounds. Cadet Chen, I'm about to share information with you that is classified at the highest levels. 3 hours ago, we received a communication from an unknown source. The message was broadcast simultaneously to every Confederation military installation in the galaxy, using transmission methods that our best scientists can't explain. She activated another display, showing what appeared to be a complex mathematical equation. But, as Sarah studied it more closely, she realized it wasn't an equation at all. It was a linguistic construct, a way of conveying meaning that transcended species-specific communication methods. Can you read it? The Admiral asked. Sarah nodded slowly. It's not meant to be read in the conventional sense. It's more like a resonance pattern. The meaning is conveyed through the relationships between the symbols rather than the symbols themselves. She paused, working through the translation in her head. It says, "We have returned to reclaim what was taken. The young must face judgment for the sins of the old. Send us your finest mind, or watch your civilization burn." The Admiral turned from the window to face Sarah directly. Our xenolinguistic experts took 14 hours to arrive at the same translation. You did it in 30 seconds. Sarah felt the crystalline device pulse more rapidly as understanding began to dawn. They're looking for someone specific, aren't they? Someone with particular analytical capabilities. That's our assessment. And based on your performance here at the Academy, along with recommendations from sources I cannot reveal, the Confederation Council believes that someone might be you. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of galactic civilization settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. Everything the Keth Mori had told her was coming true, ancient evils stirring in the void, seeking something specific, threatening everything known civilization held dear. What exactly are you asking me to do, Admiral? Report to Starbase Echo in the Proxima Centauri system in 72 hours. You'll be joining a joint task force of our most experienced officers and advanced tactical systems. Your job will be to analyze whatever intelligence we can gather about this threat and help us find a way to stop it. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision before her. She was 18 years old, the youngest cadet in Academy history, barely 4 feet from small-town mining colony to the front lines of what might be the most important conflict in galactic history. But, as she stood there in the Admiral's office, looking at the data patterns that showed entire civilizations vanishing without a trace, she felt something else besides fear. She felt curiosity. Whatever was out there, whatever ancient intelligence was systematically dismantling star systems, it was solving problems on a scale she had never encountered before. And Sarah Chun had never met a problem she couldn't solve. I'll need to pack some additional research materials, she said finally. Admiral Thessera smiled for the first time since the crisis began. I thought you might say that. Your transport leaves in 6 hours. And Cadet Chin? The entire galaxy is counting on that remarkable mind of yours. Don't let us down. As Sarah left the Admiral's office and headed back to her dormitory to prepare for departure, she didn't notice the shadows that followed her through the corridors. The Keth Mori were keeping their promise of protection, even if she wasn't yet aware of just how much danger she was walking into. But, in her pocket, the crystalline device pulsed with warm light. And somehow Sarah knew that whatever waited for her in the void between stars, she wouldn't face it alone. Starbase Echo floated in the void like a mechanical moon, its massive bulk bristling with sensor arrays and defensive weapons that could crack planets. Built during the Void Wars as humanity's first major contribution to galactic defense, it represented the pinnacle of human engineering integrated with alien technology. Sarah had studied its specifications in her architectural design electives, but Seeing it through the viewport of her transport shuttle was entirely different from examining blueprints. The task force assembled in Echo's primary briefing chamber represented the finest military minds in the galaxy. Admiral Karath, the legendary Brutari strategist who had never lost a battle. Commander Silthara of the Luminari Deep Reconnaissance Division, whose light-based espionage techniques were unmatched. Captain Tvor from the Vorthan Crystal Fleet, whose defensive capabilities had saved entire systems. And leading them all was Fleet Admiral Helena Cross, the first human to achieve supreme command in the Confederation Navy. Sarah felt impossibly small among these titans of military strategy, but the crystalline device the Kethmori had given her provided a strange comfort. It had grown warm during the shuttle journey, and she occasionally caught glimpses of shadows moving just outside her peripheral vision, her mysterious guardians ensuring her safe arrival. Admiral Cross called the meeting to order with the crisp efficiency that had made her famous throughout the galaxy. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, we face a threat unlike anything in recorded history. In the past 6 days, 7-star systems have been completely erased from existence. Not destroyed, erased. Our best sensors cannot detect any trace of the missing matter, and the energy required for such an operation exceeds our current understanding of physics. The holographic display showed the progression of disappearances, each one following the mathematical pattern Sarah had identified. But there were new data points now. 3 more systems had vanished exactly as she had predicted, confirming her analysis with terrifying accuracy. However, Admiral Cross continued, we have received new intelligence that may help us understand what we're facing. Cadet Chen, would you please present your findings? Sarah stood, acutely aware that every eye in the room was focused on her. These were beings who commanded fleets and shaped the destiny of civilizations, and she was an 18-year-old girl who still needed a stepladder to reach the top shelves in the Academy library. But when she began to speak, her voice carried the same quiet authority that had impressed her instructors and saved her team from the Void Hunters. The pattern of disappearances isn't random, and it's not just following a mathematical sequence. It's a search algorithm. She gestured to the display, highlighting specific systems. Each missing system was investigated before its destruction. Preliminary sensor sweeps, gravitational probes, even what appears to be limited atmospheric sampling on inhabited worlds. Whatever is doing this is looking for something specific. Admiral Karath leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the briefing table. Looking for what? Information. But not data in the conventional sense. They're looking for a particular type of consciousness. A way of thinking that they need for some purpose we don't yet understand. Sarah activated the linguistic analysis she had prepared during the journey. The original message we received, send us your finest mind, wasn't a random demand. It was a job posting. They need someone who can think in ways they cannot, and they're willing to destroy entire civilizations to find that person. Commander Silthara's luminous form flickered with what Sarah had learned to recognize as concern. You believe they're searching for a specific individual? I believe they're searching for a specific type of human, Sarah replied. Something in our psychological makeup that other species lack. The ability to find solutions by looking at problems from completely unexpected angles. Captain Tvor's crystalline body resonated with harmonic frequencies as he processed the implications. If this is accurate, then negotiation might be possible. We could offer them what they seek in exchange for ending their campaign of destruction. Sarah felt the crystalline device in her pocket pulse with what seemed like warning. I don't think negotiation is an option. Based on the pattern of their attacks and the linguistic structure of their communication, they're not just looking for cooperation, they're looking for domination. They want someone to solve problems for them, but they have no intention of stopping their expansion once they get what they need. Fleet Admiral Cross studied the tactical display with the intensity that had made her the youngest flag officer in Confederation history. So we're facing an enemy with technology beyond our understanding, vast destructive capabilities, and a specific interest in acquiring human analytical abilities. Recommendations. We need more information, Sarah said immediately. The disappearances follow a pattern, which means they're predictable. The next target should be the Tau Ceti system in approximately 4 hours. If we can get a reconnaissance team there ahead of them, we might be able to observe their methods and gather intelligence about their capabilities. Admiral Karatha's laugh was like grinding stone. Send a reconnaissance team to watch their system get destroyed? That's suicide, not strategy. But Admiral Cross was nodding thoughtfully. What kind of reconnaissance assets would you need, Cadet Chen? Sarah had been thinking about this problem during the entire journey to Starbase Echo. A single ship with maximum stealth capabilities and the most advanced sensor suite we can manage. Something fast enough to escape if discovered, but sophisticated enough to record whatever happens for analysis. The Whisper, Commander Silthara suggested. My scout ship. Luminari stealth technology combined with human sensor integration. It can observe from the edge of a system without being detected. Admiral Cross made the decision with characteristic speed. Commander Silthara will take the Whisper to Tau Ceti with a full reconnaissance package. Cadet Shun, you'll accompany the mission as tactical analyst. Absolutely not, Admiral Karath rumbled. Sending an untested cadet into a combat zone is madness. With respect, Admiral, Sarah interrupted. I'm the only person here who has successfully predicted their behavior patterns. If something unexpected happens during the reconnaissance, my analysis might be the difference between gathering useful intelligence and losing another ship. The room fell silent as the senior officers considered her words. Finally, Admiral Cross nodded. Agreed. Commander Silthara, prepare for immediate departure. And, Cadet Chen, stay close to our Luminari friend. If this goes badly, I want you off that system and back here alive. 3 hours later, Sarah found herself strapped into the co-pilot's seat of the fastest ship in the Confederation fleet. The Whisper was a marvel of hybrid technology, its hull incorporating Luminari light-bending systems that could render it invisible to most sensors, while human-designed computing cores processed information at superhuman speeds. Commander Silthara was unlike any Luminari Sarah had met before. Where most members of her species glowed with soft, steady radiance, Silthara's light shifted constantly, sometimes bright and focused like a laser, other times dim and diffuse like scattered starlight. Sarah realized this was probably an adaptation for stealth work, the ability to control her natural luminescence for tactical advantage. First time in deep space? The commander asked as they approached the jump point for Tau Ceti. Sarah nodded, watching the stars stretch into lines as they entered hyperspace. I've run simulations, but this is my first actual mission outside the Sol system. And possibly your last, if these entities are as dangerous as our intelligence suggests. Silthara's light flickered with what might have been humor. Are you certain you want to go through with this? Before Sarah could answer, the crystalline device in her pocket began to pulse rapidly. She pulled it out, noting that its internal light was brighter than she had ever seen it. What is that? Commander Silthara asked. A gift from some very old friends, Sarah replied carefully. I think it's trying to warn us about something. The device's pulsing grew more urgent as they approached the Tau Ceti system. By the time they dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge, it was glowing so brightly that Sarah had to shield it with her jacket to avoid affecting the bridge lighting. Sensors are detecting normal system traffic, Commander Silthara reported. 7 billion inhabitants across 4 worlds, standard commercial shipping, orbital manufacturing platforms. No sign of any anomalous activity. Sarah studied the sensor readouts, looking for the patterns that might indicate the approaching threat. They're not here yet. According to my calculations, we have approximately 17 minutes before the universe exploded with impossible geometry. Space itself seemed to tear open like fabric, revealing voids filled with writhing darkness that hurt to look at directly. From these tears emerged ships, if they could be called ships, that defied every principle of physics Sarah had ever learned. They were vast and organic-looking, covered with what appeared to be living tissue that pulsed with internal bioluminescence. But their size was incomprehensible. The smallest of them was larger than Starbase Echo, and the largest stretched across distances that should have been measured in astronomical units rather than kilometers. My ancestors preserve us, Commander Silthara whispered, her light flickering with shock and terror. Sarah watched the sensor readings with fascination rather than fear. The ships weren't just large. They were operating according to principles that suggested a complete mastery over spacetime itself. They moved through the void without any visible propulsion systems, and their approach to the inhabited worlds generated gravitational effects that should have required the mass of entire stars. Are we recording this? She asked. Every sensor we have is active, Silthara confirmed. Though I'm not sure our databanks can process information at this scale. The alien ships positioned themselves around the system's star with mathematical precision. Sarah watched as they extended what looked like vast tendrils of living metal that connected each ship to its neighbors, forming a complex geometric pattern around Tau Ceti itself. They're not destroying the system, Sarah realized suddenly. They're studying it. The tendrils are some kind of scanning array. As if responding to her observation, streams of energy began flowing between the alien ships and the star. But these weren't weapons. They were more like queries, pulses of information that seemed to be analyzing the star's internal structure at the subatomic level. Looking for something, Sarah murmured, her analytical mind racing through the implications. Not just random destruction. They're mining information from the star itself. The process took exactly 11 minutes. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the scanning stopped. The alien ships began to retract their tendrils, and Sarah could see new configurations of energy building within their organic hulls. Now they destroy it, Commander Silthara said grimly. But Sarah was shaking her head. No, look at the energy patterns. That's not a weapons buildup, it's a storage array. They're preparing to take something with them. What happened next would haunt Sarah's dreams for the rest of her life. The alien ships didn't destroy Tau Ceti, they consumed it. Not just the star, but everything in the system. Planets, moons, asteroids, space stations, billions of living beings. All of it was somehow absorbed into the alien vessels, leaving behind only empty space and the faint gravitational echoes of what had once been a thriving solar system. But the most horrifying part was the silence. No distress calls, no evacuation attempts, no signs of struggle or resistance. The entire system simply ceased to exist as if it had never been there at all. The question is, Sarah said quietly, what did they take from the star that required them to consume everything else? Her crystalline device had stopped pulsing and now glowed with steady, warm light. As the alien ships began to fold space around themselves, preparing to depart for their next target, Sarah thought she caught a glimpse of familiar shadows moving between the observation deck and the command systems. Commander, she said carefully, are you detecting any other ships in this system? Silthara checked her instruments. Negative. Just us and whatever those things were. But Sarah could feel them, her Kethmori guardians, watching from the spaces between dimensions. They had followed her here, ensuring her safety while she witnessed something that might hold the key to saving galactic civilization. We need to get this data back to Starbase Echo immediately, Sarah said. I think I know what they're looking for, and if I'm right, we don't have much time. As the Whisper jumped back toward Confederation space, Sarah began working on an analysis that would change everything. The alien ships hadn't just been scanning the star, they had been extracting information from its quantum structure. Specifically, they had been looking for traces of a particular type of consciousness that could leave quantum signatures in stellar matter. They were hunting for evidence of human analytical thinking, the unique way her species approached problem-solving that left measurable traces in the universe itself. And, based on the pattern of their search, Sarah realized with growing horror that they weren't just looking for any human mind. They were looking for her. The crystalline device pulsed once in what seemed like confirmation, and Sarah understood that her real education was just beginning. Whatever the Kethmori were, whatever cosmic game they were playing, she was at the center of it now. The question was whether she could solve the puzzle of these ancient destroyers before they found what they were really searching for. But, as the Whisper raced through hyperspace towards safety, Sarah Chin smiled for the first time since the crisis began. She had never met a problem she couldn't solve, and she had just been presented with the ultimate intellectual challenge. Somewhere in the void behind them, ancient entities that had devoured civilizations noticed her smile and began to alter their search patterns accordingly. The hunt for the galaxy's most dangerous mind was about to become very personal indeed. And, in the spaces between dimensions, the Kethmori prepared for war.